This week on London Real, we have the American spiritual teacher, author, and lecturer, Marianne Williamson.
Your life changes when you begin having a different conversation in your head. And your society changes when you begin having a different conversation in the society. And that's the most powerful force in the universe, is an agreement between two people. You can't bring the light to the darkness. You have to bring the darkness to light. Forgiveness means standing in conviction that love will have the final say here. Modernity is an assault. We all are receiving through the internet and so many other sources ultimately meaningless stimuli. Well, the greatest moral challenge of my generation, of Americans, is to get money out of politics.
London Real presents Marianne Williamson, Our Deepest Fear.
And my life works really well when I practice what I preach. You can't just know it.
Every now and then when I'm preparing for a guest on London Real, I sit back and say, whoa, look who is coming into the studio. It's pretty incredible, and that applies for this week, and that is Marianne Williamson. She is a spiritual teacher, a famous author. She's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Larry King Live, Charlie Rose, and she's written 11 books, 4 of which are New York Times bestsellers. I was preparing for her, and I watched 2 different presentations that she had made on YouTube in the past 3 weeks. One of them was a 2.5-hour piece that she addressed the Harvard Divinity School, where she dropped science about American history, religion. It was like 500 years of history, like on the cuff. And then another one was an 8-minute long rousing speech she gave in Salt Lake City to a group of women that was very Martin Luther King-esque. And I was just like, wow, this woman has amazing versatility. She's also known around the world for a quote that is often accredited to Nelson Mandela. And that is, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. There's a whole quote that goes with it. And so I was slightly intimidated, but very excited to sit down with Marianne. And let me say, she did not disappoint. The people on the London Real Academy that have been able to watch this before you have already said they couldn't stop. They were walking around with their laptops in their flats because they didn't want to get away from the screen. And she is so compelling. She is so deep. You can see how she made Oprah Winfrey cry. We talked about terrorists attacks, how you forgive people that do such bad things. We talked about her run in politics and how she was deeply affected by not being elected for U.S. Congress. We talked about Donald Trump. We talked about her own spirituality, and if she is even able to forgive. There were so many things that we covered, and she was so open and honest with me. I even got to ask her a little bit about psychedelics, and so I was really honored to have the time with her. She is an amazing woman. She was off to go to New Delhi, where she's like, I'm going to speak at a conference for the Prime Minister, and I think I had said, oh, you're attending, and she said, no, I'm speaking. So she's just constantly working, constantly expressing herself, and I don't think I'm giving away any secrets here. She's in her 60s and looks like she's in her 30s. So, much love to Marianne, and thank you so much for the time. It was just absolutely fabulous having her, and I think this is going to be an amazing episode. Please take notes. So much to learn from this woman, so enjoy that. Most likely, you're actually watching this on the London Real Academy, and everyone keeps asking me, Brian, what is this academy? And it's a great question. It's kind of a secret group that we have, and it's the most hardcore London Reelers from around the world, about 1,000 of us, that we get together to build the best versions of ourselves, to push each other, just to be the best you. We set goals that are actually smart, as in they are calculated with specific end dates, and we're accountable if we don't meet those goals. We talk to each other on our private activity feed and our private Facebook group, and we meet up together here in London at the studios, at Toronto, in New York, and Chicago, the West Coast, Amsterdam. It's actually a really incredible group, and I draw so much energy from these people, so much excitement, so much giving, so much love. And so a lot of people asked me more about it, so we made a quick video here. Check it out.
The entrepreneurial journey, it can be a lonely road. I push myself in so many areas, but you know, you can't do it all yourself.
The thing about the Academy is, it's like, look, you have the ideas, you have the ability, you have the skill, and you have the sort of ambition for yourself. But when you have a group of people pulling you forward, it's so important.
Accountability is what's missing from most of the programs or any gurus or any internet mentor that I had before.
I wanted to get some accountability. I wanted to make myself accountable to a group, to you.
The reason we started the Academy is because I felt like we were doing these amazing talks, like we'd have a Peter Sage episode or a Dan Pena episode or a Kala or someone, and you get super inspired, and then YouTube stops, and then you go back to your life and you don't make any changes. And it was just like, it felt like, what are we doing? If you're designing your life right, the good times are now. And in a few years, you'll look back and say, wow, that was amazing.
The thing about the Academy is it has so many different sort of layers to it. I think your web seminars are awesome. The way you broke it down and the style of your teaching is pretty awesome.
I like the feed. When I have to motivate myself, I kind of look at others struggling and getting over those struggles. So I actually follow daily the feed.
Best feature would be the sort of Facebook aspect of it, the social media aspect of it, as in creating a profile with your goals, your dreams.
Everyone's on the same vibe, and we may be at different stages in our journeys, but everyone's on the same page at the end of the day. Everyone's really trying to push themselves and building the best you. It really resonates with me.
And the fact that I'm committing a small amount of money and the fact that I'm actually trying to interact with those people means that I'm invested and means that I will keep it for the long run.
You have to be serious about yourself and what you want to achieve. And if you're serious about yourself, this is going to be such a fantastic platform.
London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Marianne Williamson, an American spiritual teacher, author, and lecturer who has appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show, Larry King Live, and Charlie Rose. You've published 11 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers, and are the founder of Project Angel Food, a Meals on Wheels program that serves homebound people with AIDS in the Los Angeles area. You also ran for U.S. Congress in 2014. Your quote, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure, in our light, not our darkness. That most frightens us," is world-renowned. It's often accredited to Nelson Mandela. We had a guest in here, Chris Eubank, a former world championship boxer, who actually quoted you, but he thought it was Nelson, so we corrected him. Marianne, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's nice having you here. I wanted to know, what is the relationship between Marianne and London?
Oh, I love the city, and my daughter lives here. Right now, she's in Vienna because she's needing someone to hire her so that she can get a visa to come back in case anybody's listening who wants a fantastic, highly educated young woman to work for them. But she has lived here for 6-7 years and is definitely an expat. And like any mother, I'm just happy that my daughter has found her soul's home. So I feel particular affection for the city because it is where my daughter's finding her life. living her life.
Do you find it to be a spiritual place for you? Or what kind of energy do you feel when you come to London?
Well, I think spiritual is what's inside people. I think everybody's on a spiritual path. Most people just don't know it. So any place where there are human beings, I find spirituality. That's the path of the heart. There is so much to admire here about the history, about the culture, and about the people. So I'm highly entertained here, educated here. It's a more sophisticated culture. All European culture is more sophisticated than the United States. But you know, spiritually, I think, I feel strongly about honoring your incarnation. I think that we're like cells of the body are assigned. Some cells are assigned to the heart, some cells are assigned to the lungs, some cells are assigned to the pancreas or to the bones or to the blood. I think we're all assigned, some to the arts, some to the sciences, some to business, and we're assigned to places. We're assigned to North America, we're assigned to Europe, we're assigned to Asia. Now, some people like my daughter are born one place and then they feel their soul's assignment somewhere else. For me, I feel my soul's assignment is the United States. So it's not about preferring it, it's where your heart calls you and says, serve there.
I'm from San Diego, so when I tell people that, they're like, why did you leave? But for me, this is my town.
Well, also, I don't know why anybody would, I don't know who says that. Oh, why, whatever. Yes, you have found your soul is at home here. The way my soul is, my daughter's soul is at home in London. My soul is at home in Los Angeles and a few other places. But I always feel, I think we're all so growing in this global consciousness and an awareness that we need to be global citizens at this time. The world is just changing so much that, you know, I knew when I first started lecturing in Los Angeles and in New York, that if you're really going to have a career that speaks to the heart of things, you can't stay on just one coast. Now, if you really want to speak to the heart of things, you can't stay in just one continent. So more and more, technology is giving us this opportunity, travel is giving us this opportunity. So we're all becoming less and less geocentric, I think, and that's a good thing.
And you are all over the place. You were in the States last month in Salt Lake, in Boston. You're going to New Delhi after this.
Yeah.
You stay busy.
I travel a lot, yes.
And is that because your message needs to be delivered everywhere?
I don't think of my message as needing to be delivered. That would feel rather grandiose. No, I don't see it that way. But I do think in life, you start to live from a sense of something pushing you from inside, some inner calling and guidance. And I feel just so privileged and blessed that, at this point in my career, given how long I've been doing this, I'm honored and privileged that anybody wants to hear anything I have to say. And the fact that that invitation comes from so many places in the world, it's a great honor.
I watched you speak at the Harvard Divinity School recently, and you were talking, you kind of dropped a kind of history of religion and politics intersecting in America. You're very well studied in that. And I was curious, when you come to London and look at England's rich, often twisted, hard to believe history of religion and politics. Do you find that kind of fascinating?
Yes, and my daughter is a British historian and a religious historian, so I hear so much from her, and I do find it fascinating. Listen, nations are just collections of individuals. I find people fascinating. So there are very few countries whose history is not on some level fascinating. England, though, is amazing. Nobody is ever doubting that. The thing about the United States at this time, however, is just our sheer size, our sheer numbers, and the power that is a result of that, is such that we are consequential. And when we get it right, we have been and continue to be a blessing on the world. But when we get it wrong, terrible things can result. And so I think that there's a sense of responsibility that goes along with American citizenship now that is not more meaningful than any other citizenship, but brings with it a deep recognition that American foreign policy, for instance, for ill or for good, can affect the lives of so many millions of people at this point.
You made reference to that in your Huffington Post article about the recent terror attacks in Paris, and you said, quote, "Americans are decent people, but some decisions made in our name over the last few decades have been a deep and dark betrayal of that decency. I was wondering if you could explain that article or what you were thinking.
I believe that the invasion of Iraq, with which England went along, by the way, but certainly instigated by the United States, was more than, people say, oh, it was a mistake, or it was one of the biggest foreign policy failures or mistakes in American history. Well, yeah. Don't stop with that. Move on with that and allow yourself to truly feel the horror of what we did. Just the sheer immorality of the fact and stupidity of the fact that we attacked a country that it had nothing to do with 9/11, that had not attacked us. There were many people within the security agencies of the United States who deeply questioned the issue of weapons of mass destruction. We have the majority of U.S. senators who didn't bother to even walk down the hall and read that classified material, although it was available to them. And with that invasion, and also with the unbelievably inept, to put it mildly, way that we dealt with the city of Baghdad and beyond Baghdad after the invasion, created an even larger horror. As one woman said to me, an Iraqi woman said to me, when Saddam and his sons were alive, we knew we had three monsters. And we're not stupid. We talked about it all the time. And what we would do about those three monsters, you have unleashed unlimited monsters. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Saddam Hussein himself was a secularist. It's not like he was a good guy. He was a terrible man. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not invading every country that is led by someone whose actions we find horrifying. And with this invasion, we have unleashed this horror. I mean, ISIL, much of the leadership of ISIL grew out of the disbanded army. Our politics is like allopathic medicine. It's like traditional allopathic Western medicine, where all you do is seek to eradicate the symptoms or suppress the symptoms. That's not adequate to the challenges of this moment. We need a more integrative approach to social and political issues, just like we now accept a more integrative paradigm in medicine, that there are psychological factors, that there are emotional factors, that there are spiritual factors. And part of that emotional and psychological factor is factoring in whether what you are doing leads to human despair. Does it lead to people hating you? Does it lead to people's hopelessness? Because whenever you have large groups of people who are desperate and hopeless, and particularly if they hate you, then you are creating for yourself a national security risk. Because those people will, by definition, in time, become more vulnerable to ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. And that's what we have on our hands now. We abdicated a moral field. We did not live up to the best of what we are as Western civilization. And as a consequence, the problem didn't begin with how many people wanted to kill us, but just with people not liking us, and then giving them reason to deeply distrust us. And they were rather easy to pull over. Now, this is not in any way to justify or to rationalize anything being done, the horrors being done in Paris and by ISIL, and beheadings and execution and the horrible things they're doing. Quite the opposite. I'm not a pacifist. I think that we did the moral thing in taking on Hitler, obviously. To me, that's obvious. But it's not as simple now. This is not an operable cancer we're talking about here. This is a cancer that is metastasized. So I'm not facile here. I'm not like, oh, we just need to love, love, love. But I am saying the fact that we did not love and we did not factor in genuine moral questioning and deep reflective thought. And we as citizens, I think, how much did we really protest? How much did we really think deeply, each of us, about the invasion of Iraq? And in our own countries, both in England and in the United States, put up a fuss about it if, upon deep reflection, we did disagree with our governments. Now we are where we are. And I think that one of the important things for us to do, those countries among us who do feel, wow, maybe we shouldn't have done what we did, is to atone. This is where spirituality intersects with politics. Just like as individuals, when you know that you have contributed to your own disasters. And grown-ups do that. Grown-ups take a good look, and when things don't go right in our lives, we say, what even little part did I play in fostering this catastrophe in my life? Not everything is like that. But a lot of times you're getting a divorce, whatever, and if you're deep in your thinking, you go, I can see where I contributed to the demise of my marriage. So that's true in most situations in life, not all, but most situations in life, if we're honest with ourselves. If we take that fearless moral inventory that they talk about in the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, if you do take a real inventory of your own character defects, then you find that power. It's a spiritual power, it's atonement. It's a genuine cosmic reset button. And I think the Western nations need to do that now.
How can the US atone, or the UK atone? What would that look like if someone listened to you right now? Not that Obama and David Cameron could do it on their own, but say they could. What would that act look like?
Well, it's a very good question, and thank you for asking it, because it's a question that it's what we should be asking. The beauty of a free democratic society and the beauty of vigorous democracies like England and the United States is that things change when the conversations change. Your life changes when you begin having a different conversation in your head, and your society changes when you begin having a different conversation in the society. You know, Europe, Germany after World War II. And by the way, I'm not analogizing here the horrors of the Holocaust with foreign policy errors in the United States or Britain. So maybe that's not the best example. But there are examples of countries who, in their case, of course, it was full on mea culpa. How could there be anything else? But there are less egregious, less heinous errors. And to the people who died in Iraq and other places where we have destabilized the Middle East, that would not be a less heinous error. Nations can atone. And on a metaphysical level, two or more. If there just begins, you know, the field, the quantum field, the spiritual field is beyond the realm of time and space. The three-dimensional realm, you know, Einstein said time and space are illusions of consciousness. So the entire three-dimensional realm is like a veil in front of a truer truth. And we pierce that veil anytime two people agree on something. That's the most powerful force in the universe, is an agreement between two people. That's what the metaphysical traditions say. So just you and me talking, you and me having this conversation, people who are watching, people who are thinking, you know, that's true, we need to atone and own our own part. It begins to affect the field. It begins to affect things on an etheric level. And all minds are joined. So once you make a shift in perception, and once that shift in perception is shared, then it begins to affect situations that we can't even understand or know about on a rational level.
Europe felt ISIS or ISIL this last week, you know, tragedy in Paris, and we've heard about the events. Has America kind of gotten it around their head that, you know, that this is something to really be concerned of, to be scared of?
I've been in deep touch, as I'm sure you have been as an American, with friends there. You know, is it as big a deal there? And from what I hear, absolutely yes. And it has affected the conversation in the American presidential race and so forth. Absolutely, this was big. This was really big. Of course, we were affected by Charlie Hebdo, but obviously this is beyond. I think everybody knows that this is a hit at Western civilization at this point. It's the next one London, it's the next one Washington, it's the next one Los Angeles, it's the next one Madrid.
You're known for your thoughts on forgiveness. I mean, not more so than anything else, but very much so.
Yes.
You know, you taught Oprah lessons about forgiveness. You made me start thinking about forgiveness in a different way. When you hear stuff that happened, you know, a week ago in Paris, I'm sure a lot of people look to you. What are your first thoughts when it comes to managing forgiveness in this situation, especially a few days afterwards? Forgiveness
is everything, but you do have to name what it is you're forgiving. So the first job is for us to look from a spiritual perspective, is look at yourself. And that's why I'm talking so much about national atonement, how the United States and Britain and others need to take a deep look at how our own foreign policy has betrayed the best values of our people. The quote that you read there before. There was an article by David Stockman, who is no liberal. David Stockman was Ronald Reagan's finance guy. So this is no raving lefty. But he wrote a scathing article that is very, very important reading, I think, for everybody, that was in the Huffington Post a couple of days ago, around November 17th, I think, where he talks about after the Berlin Wall came down, we could have disbanded NATO at that point. You know, with Britain and the United States, we all started sending ships to the Persian Gulf. I mean, there are so many things for us to look at. And this is not a blame America or blame England sentiment. This is a grown-up taking responsibility. So the first issue of forgiveness is forgiving ourselves, but we can't forgive ourselves until first we name. You know, in the Course in Miracles, it says you can't bring the light to the darkness. You have to bring the darkness to light. So the first issue of forgiveness is praying for forgiveness for our own mistakes and for our own casual acquiescence to violence perpetrated, particularly against a country who had not attacked us. I think we need to humbly pray for forgiveness. Abraham Lincoln said, nations have to confess their sins and pray for forgiveness, just like individuals do, and I agree with that passionately. Secondly, in terms of forgiveness regarding someone like terrorists and ISIL.
Yeah, people that were in Paris that day that saw things happen.
Well, you know, I think some of the most eloquent and profound words that have been said and written on this issue have come from victims' families and victims themselves, that we will refuse to hate. Forgiveness is not, you're a jerk, you did something terrible, but I'm spiritual, so I forgive you. Forgiveness is simply the recognition that beyond this veil of illusion, beyond the destructible lies the indestructible. Fear is merely the absence of love. You turn on love, fear is gone. The same way when you turn on light, darkness is gone. Forgiveness means standing in conviction that love will have the final say here. And that the love, I don't believe that people who are terrorists were born to be terrorists. One of the problems that we have in the world today is how many young children are being taught to hate. Little children in many parts of the world, in some countries that your country and mine do a lot of business with every day. These children are being taught to hate. So children are not born this way. Children are not born this way. And then other situations, such as ones I've mentioned, have, I think, bred a lot of fear and anger in people. For us to know that all people are good, but that insanity exists, and damaged people damage people, and people can go insane, and people who are violently, criminally insane exist within the context of an entire human race that is insane. That is what Gandhi said, that the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. We have not predicated our domestic and international policies on justice and brotherhood and love. And when you don't fill a room with light, darkness sets in. So forgiveness means taking responsibility for where we have not been channels of light, knowing that those who are instruments of evil, and I do believe it is naive to underestimate the level of evil that we're talking about here. I do. I think that in our minds, they need to be spiritually quarantined. It's like you think of someone who is someone who would cut off your head if he had a chance. And you surround him in your visualization and in your meditation with a golden egg, and you see the eggshell is made of a kind of titanium, and the malevolence in the mind of that person can't get past the titanium to turn into worldly manifestation. But then on the inside of the eggshell, you have to see a golden light pouring at them and healing them and welcoming them back into that brotherhood of man. That's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is knowing that there are other levels here than just what the mortal eye can see. And in that place, love still reigns. But we need to stand on the ground of that love. So real forgiveness doesn't make you a doormat, and it doesn't lower your IQ, and it doesn't make you a fuzzy thinker. It doesn't make you incapable of military action. If what your heart then tells you is that military action is correct. But you would do so with a very sober mind, rather than the adrenaline of war fever.
So it's an intelligent decision. You're like, I am going to forgive that person. I've thought long and hard of it, and I'm going to consciously do it. It's not just forgiving everything.
Yes, Franklin Roosevelt did not call the Nazis evildoers. He called them unworthy men. But he kicked their ass. The Allies did what needed to be done. But you didn't get the feeling that Roosevelt or Churchill were, they weren't giddy about it.
How are you?
They were mature men. They were very mature men.
Yeah. How are you with forgiveness? Are you a black belt in forgiveness? Is that
I'm a black belt in forgiveness. It's interesting that you say that. What's right under black belt? Brown belt?
Yeah.
I'm a brown belt in forgiveness.
Okay. And where were you 5 years ago? Were you the brown belt as well, or have you gotten better?
I've gotten better. I always say I wasn't abused as a child, but I've been plenty abused as an adult. And my astrological sign is Cancer. I can be thin-skinned. I can be as reactive as anybody. I can be as don't fuck with me as anybody.
Do you think you'll achieve the black belt level, or do you think that's...
No, I already told you I'm not black belt, but I'm brown.
But you never will be a black belt.
Oh no, I think that we should all hold. That's a very serious topic, question that you raised, because in A Course in Miracles it says, you are not perfect or you would not have been born, but it is your mission to become perfect here. I often say, somewhat in a kind of amused way, well, I'm no enlightened master, but I'm sure better than I used to be. That's where most of us are, but I think with the events in the world today, that's not enough. Only a very, very evolved civilization will know how to handle what we're faced with in the world today. So I think that what is called for is all of us committing ourselves and deepening our intention and our devotion to the goal of becoming black belts as never before. So no, I'm a brown belt at forgiveness, but I'm very aware pretty much every day of my life that the goal is black belt.
What was it like growing up in Texas in the 50s?
Texas is great. It has been deeply misrepresented by some political figures. Texas is great. Texas was great, and Texas is great. And I'm sorry it has gained the reputation that it has, which it deserves in some ways. But, like I grew up in Houston. Houston is a world-class city and a very progressive city, politically as well as otherwise. Austin is one of the great, fantastic places in the United States. So Texas is great. And I feel that there are a lot of things even in my career, I've sort of read things and I've said, well, and I've read people say things about me, say, well, she's a woman, and that's really a woman who's out there. And then somebody would say, well, she's Jewish, and so, she's really got that attitude that Jews have. And I've thought so many times, no, I said, I'm from Texas. That's what you're seeing. What you're calling, as a product of my Jewish personality or my female personality is actually my Texas personality. So, I'm Texan.
I don't know if you answered my question or not, but...
What was it like growing up? Well, this is the adult that you get out of the child, so...
And it's 100% Texan?
No, whatever. I live in California, I've lived in New York, I've lived in New Mexico. It's like we were talking about at the beginning. I think as we evolve, our souls belong certain places, but I think the conversation in the world today needs to be our common humanity, no matter where we are. Geography is just geography at the deepest level.
How did you learn how to speak? Because, like I said, I saw you speak for 2 hours at the Harvard Divinity School about, it seemed off the cuff, but you were weaving in all sorts of fascinating ideas about history, spirituality, divinity. And then I saw you speak in Salt Lake City, 8-minute power speech,
Thank you.
Martin Luther King-esque inspired, felt almost Southern Baptist, and it was just a completely different piece. And those were within the space of like 5 days. And how do you get to that level of speaking, and also how did you get there and why?
Well, first of all, I've been doing what I do for 30 years, and I write books. So if you've written a book about something, you spent a long time working out your ideas, writing them. So by the time you're talking, to say it's off the cuff, you've been thinking about these things and talking about these things for years. I think of myself as a kind of jazz philosopher. I might not know exactly what riff I'm going to use at a particular moment, but I have practiced that riff. I think sometimes people are overly impressed with the way I answer questions. Oh, I can't believe I actually knew to answer that question. I'm like, I have heard it about 30 times before, right? It's not like I've never heard this question before. It's not like I haven't had the opportunity to think this one through. So I wouldn't call it off the cuff, but there is a spontaneity which you lose if you go into any environment knowing exactly what you want to say at exactly the particular time. I think you rehearse and then you throw out the script once the curtain goes up.
Okay, and for that 8-minute speech, where did that kind of inspiration from? Who do you look to? You looked at Martin Luther King, or did you're from the South, you're from
Right.
Houston, which is closer to the South than, say, Dallas.
Yeah.
You must have been around some of that feeling. I personally love it. I wish we would bring more of it back.
Right.
We don't see it over here, obviously, and I don't see too many political
Well,
figures
I
like that.
hear there are a bunch of Texans here in London. That talk that did really go viral, that little talk I gave at the Parliament of World Religions, that was to the women's plenary session. Now, I have a career that is non-denominational. I am not a clergy. And I have, for 6 years, I had a pulpit. I was the spiritual leader of a unity church, of a spiritual center in Warren, Michigan. I was in Michigan for 8 years. So I have strong ideas about organized religion. I have strong ideas about institutionalized religion. And for the most part, I don't have a lot of respect. I think that for the most part, now this is a broad generalization, but for the most part, organized institutionalized religion has abdicated its role. Abdicated its role as real comforter, abdicated its role as real healer, and abdicated its role of conscience. It has been co-opted by the worldly mind for the most part. It's about doctrines and theories and buildings and dictates and dogma. I have very little respect for that. And so when you have this Parliament of World Religions and they're making a big deal about the fact that there's so many women and women's voices will be heard, I'm just not the kind of person, say it, I'm a Jew, I'm a woman, or I'm a Texan. I'm not going to let that bullshit stand. I'm not going to not speak what I feel needs to be spoken, which is thank you very much for letting us in this weekend. Hello, but historically, you've not been so good to women, and in many cases, you're still not good to women. So can we talk and be real? Because that's what I cannot stand about the hypocrisy of organized religious institutions that don't keep it real. There is no Spirit of God when it's not real. There is no Shakti when it's not real. There is no real space of that electricity of human transformation when it's not real, when it's not honest. That's why we're talking about even in politics, it's the same thing. Can we be real here about British and American foreign policy? You simply do not get to the truth. You do not get to the transformational fire if you are not real. And that is what compels me. That is what, to me, is the fire and the love and the radicalism at the center of things. And so many people today are walking around kind of having checked out. Now we're numbing ourselves, so many people numbing themselves, this epidemic of unnecessary, absolutely unnecessary, casual antidepressant use. So to me, religion should be an awakener. Education should be an awakener. And so when I go onto a stage, whether it's at Harvard or at the Parliament of World Religions, I'm going to the best of my ability, say it as I see it.
Is the Catholic Church going to get real anytime soon? Well,
I have a lot of respect for Pope Francis. You know, when I was growing up, when I was a little girl, John the 23rd was Pope. And, you know, I grew up, I'm Jewish, and we Jews had tremendous respect for John the 23rd. He was the spiritual leader for the world. We had great respect for him. And then in the intervening years, Catholicism has moved away from its emphasis on social justice issues, or at least the Church, the Vatican has moved away from what I grew up with, which was the Catholic emphasis on social justice issues, more onto the issues of abortion, personal morality, and so forth. So I have tremendous respect for Pope Francis. I think he is someone that I feel as an individual. To me, I think of him as a genuine spiritual leader, not just for Catholics, but for all of us. I do not see him as my religious leader because I'm not Catholic. But as a spiritual, global spiritual leader, I see him as that, just like the Dalai Lama. And so I don't know in the internals of the church. I did not incarnate a Catholic. I'm not called to Catholicism. I feel that it's Catholics who are on this earth to steward Catholicism. And so it's Catholic people will deal with the issue of women priests in Catholicism. That's not my beat. But in terms of the large global issues, his calling global capitalism on its ethical issues and so forth, I deeply appreciate the Pope and think that he is doing a great service to all mankind.
And the Dalai Lama?
The Dalai Lama, obviously. I think the fact that so many of us can hear the wisdom in his words. I asked him when I met him what role meditation has to play in political activism and so forth, because the intersection of spirituality and politics has always been, I'm called to that conversation. And I asked him, and he said, in order to save the world, we must have a plan, but no plan will work unless we meditate. So those have been meaningful words for me, deeply meaningful words for me. He also, he said the other day something about how humanity made this problem. He was speaking after the attacks in Paris. He said humanity made this problem, so you can't just pray and call to God to fix it. Humanity has to fix it. On one hand, he's correct that obviously that humanity created this. God didn't do this, we did. But my view, my understanding of prayer is different than his, because as I pray and asking God to fix it, I'm not asking for God to intervene between the law of cause and effect. God is not going to change the effects if I'm not willing to change the cause. But in praying, to me, we are asking for the divine intercession from a thought system beyond our own to actually change our consciousness so that we do change on a level of cause.
Do you meditate, and have you always meditated?
I've not always meditated. I've always had a spiritual and religious fervor, even from when I was a little girl. But do I meditate? Absolutely. And I think that it's the most important issue on the planet right now. Not the most important issue. I think it is the most important tool that we have for personal and global transformation.
I think it becomes more relevant these days because there's so many ways to occupy your mind.
And distraction.
Yeah, and you can have it now at any instant. Whereas back in the day, you might have to, walk home in silence.
That's so true. We are living, there is an assault. Modernity is an assault. We all are receiving through the internet and so many other sources by which ultimately meaningless stimuli is bombarding us all the time. And we've lost perspective, and we've lost, your point is so well taken. It used to be just the walk home. The fact that you didn't have a cell phone, so there were times when people couldn't reach you. So the lack of reflection, the lack of, the other day, you were talking about that 8-minute talk of mine that was all over the internet.
Yeah, felt like 25 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I read on the social media, some woman wrote, she gets to her point at 6 minutes, 41 seconds. So spread the word so that people don't have to waste their time, can go right to 6 minutes, 41 seconds. Well, on one hand, I thought it was odd. I thought it was funny what she thought was the point. But beyond that, you can't even watch 6 minutes. People have such a hard time sitting, listening to someone for 6 minutes. And we make mistakes when we're moving too fast. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Humanity is moving too fast. We're not thinking deeply. We're not reflecting. And because of that, we're not communicating deeply. We're not sharing. Even an experience like you and I are having here, because the phones are off and we're not going to do anything else. That's why I think a conversation like this is a service, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, you made that point earlier that this is how it starts, a conversation. What did you say was one of the most special things that can happen, or an agreement between two people?
Well, I said the agreement between two people. The Course in Miracles says the most powerful force in the universe is an agreement between two people. But the issue of conversation is that any change in your life starts with a change in the conversation you're having with yourself. And any change in the society comes from the fact that people start having a different conversation.
To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to londonrealacademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media, log in and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Real, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at londonrealacademy.com. So click on the link below, you'll be directed there, and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.
you.